Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome back. It's another Red Pill Religion podcast. Red Pill Religion, where amongst the things we say is that politics, culture, and religion can never be separated. They always go together. There's nothing you can do to stop it. So, one of the most important things you can do is learn about religion and be smart about it, and also learn to speak to people who are of different religions from you in some kind of respectful dialogue and try to understand their world point of view. We truly believe that that is a good thing to do. This, as I've told people many times, Red Pill Religion is not a Catholic channel, although I am a Catholic and I do run the channel. But we do talk about other things, and we even talk about things that some Catholics might not like us talking about. And that's okay. We address a secular audience, a secular world. We're friends with people of many religions. And tonight we have an interview with Pope Michael. We'll be talking about him in a minute. Before I mention that, please visit us on redpillreligion.com. We've faced quite a bit of persecution and censorship and have had multiple channels shut down, shadow bannings, and all that. So you'll always find us on redpillreligion.com. Please do support our fundraiser and support us by hitting our tip jar or on Subscribestar. And we appreciate if you like this kind of unique content, please do support us. Now, joining us tonight is Pope Michael, who preferentially, from what I understand, Pope Michael believes himself to be the Pope of the Catholic Church. He is a resident of Kansas, and Your Holiness, could you say hello to the audience?
Hello, everybody.
Now, is there Pope Michael is what you prefer to go by? You were born David Bauden, is that correct, sir?
That's correct.
Now, some years ago, I saw a documentary on you called Pope Michael. In fact, there's a link on YouTube. We'll have it on the webpage and in the low bar to the movie Pope Michael, the full documentary. It's about an hour and change, I think. And I was intrigued by this movie when I saw it. I saw it as somewhat making fun of you, but somewhat trying to take it seriously. I'm very curious, what is your impression of the movie that you were in? Because I know people who are in movies are not always, sometimes they're ecstatic with what they saw, sometimes they're not happy, sometimes it's somewhere in between. What's your opinion of your own movie, about you?
The movie about me, I think the biggest and most important point is that I did not commission it or control it, and let the documentary crew put it together themselves. And that shows that I'm open to talking with people without putting restrictions on things.
Well, that makes sense. And I mean, then do you feel that the filmmakers, let me put it to you this way. When you've been in a film, or sometimes you come away feeling that the filmmaker was not honest. Sometimes you feel the filmmaker was. I mean, overall, do you feel that it was a reasonable portrayal of your papacy?
I believe it was a reasonable portrayal of my papacy.
Well, that's fair enough. Now, all right, let's go ahead and get to this. I am a Catholic, and by the way, I joined what you consider the apostate church, I guess, because I became Catholic in 2008. So obviously, I'm in the Vatican II church. I'm in the Novus Order church. Without being, just to be blunt about it, sir, why should I consider you the legitimate pope?
Well, you need to take a look at what the Vatican II church teaches. You called it the Vatican II church because it's really a different church from the Catholic Church. What it's teaching today is not what the Catholic Church taught a century ago or 5 centuries ago, or even at the time of Christ. These teachings are substantially different from Catholic teachings. It's based upon the principle of modernism, which teaches as what is true today can be false a century from now. What is false today can be true a century from now. Benedict XVI, when he was still, I believe, a Cardinal Ratzinger, he called Vatican II a counter syllabus, meaning it reversed much of what was in the syllabus of errors condemned by Pope Pius IX, a century before Vatican II. So this is why we don't consider it the Catholic Church. It changed, and truth does not change in matters of doctrine.
Okay. Now, to be clear, I was using the term Vatican II colloquially. I do think I'm in the Catholic Church, but
Sure you do.
I was using the phrase colloquially. And as you know, probably within what I imagine you call the Novus Ordo Church or the Vatican, when you say Vatican II Church, you mean it in a more disparaging way I do. My read as a person coming into the church, just to give you a point of view, was, and still is, and there's quite a few others, is that the Vatican II documents are not the problem. The problem is that the way modernists ran with them and interpreted them. And so this seems to me more like an issue where that needs to be addressed within the church rather than simply declaring the entire See of Peter and everybody associated with it has gone completely apostate. Is it your view that you're talking about a complete apostasy of the church then, aren't you?
That's what we're talking about. It's talked about in the second chapter of 2 Thessalonians, that there will be a time in history when there will be a great revolt against the Church of Christ, and many will leave. Some call this the great apostasy. And addressing the question, there are problems in Vatican II itself.
Okay.
But I will agree with you. It's what was called the spirit of Vatican II afterwards went farther than anyone at Vatican II expected them to go. In fact, when Paul VI changed the essential rites of the sacraments, as he declares in a decree on translation, when the translators were actually translating the new form of the sacrament into the various vernaculars, some of them were trying to bring them back to the form that was in use prior to Vatican II. Vatican II itself says that the sacraments consist of two parts: the essential rites, which are unchangeable, which is the same teaching that comes from the Council of Trent, and then the accidental rites, which can change and have even changed over time. So I agree with you. The modernists took the seed planted at Vatican II and ran with it a lot farther than anyone ever thought they would. So you have actually two problems. There are some problems in Vatican II itself, and then there's the spirit of Vatican II, which took this way out into left field. In fact, there's been what I would call, quote, a conservative shift, especially under Benedict XVI, coming back to some more conservative ideas than were in vogue in the late 60s and through the 1970s.
Okay, yeah, and I've certainly been listening to a lot, especially from a Catholic writer named E. Michael Jones. Are you familiar with his work?
I've heard of him. Probably read a few of his things in the past.
Okay, well, I do recommend him, but his work, especially Libido Dominandi, The Slaughter of Cities, and The Jewish Revolutionary Spirit, but to anybody listening, including you, of course, it's excellent work, and he very much lays out with considerable documentation that much of the spirit of Vatican II, what people call the spirit of Vatican II, was really not even, like, a lot of it came in through the US CIA and Time magazine and literally irresponsible Catholic reporters going along with this modernist agenda to convince modern Catholics that this is everything Vatican II was, and it wasn't. It was misreported, it was mistranslated, as you said. Okay, well, without getting too far into it, let me just say, what prompted you you and others to decide that the church had gone so far into depravity, you were entitled to create a new conclave?
Well, basically, we first came to the conclusion that something was wrong after Vatican II. In fact, in Oklahoma City, where I grew up, a group of concerned parents pulled their children out of the CCD classes and formed their own catechism class to teach them the Catholic faith. So that's how far back people saw things were going wrong. From that, then we saw especially with what they called the changes from, well, 64, I think was the first decree that really brought them in right after the liturgy decree had been approved. And they kept you going to church one day. Well, we're not doing it this way today. We're going to do it this way. They didn't just bring in the Novus Ordo all at once. There'd been a great revolt against that, as they changed one thing at a time until eventually they switched us over to the Novus Ordo, and people start scratching their heads and saying things, especially when they mistranslated Christ's own words, pro multis, which means for many, as for all in most vernacular translations throughout the world. And say, hold it. I look at the Bible, it says for many. I look at the Mass, it says for many. I even look at the Latin original of the Novus Ordo, it says for many. Why are we translating it as for all? Isn't that a substantial change? Does that possibly invalidate the consecration of the wine at Mass? And as questions like these got people thinking. So, all right, if this all happened, how did it happen? Well, as a priest I study under way back said, the fish rots from the head. So we look to the top. This all came from Paul VI, especially, and was carried on by John Paul I, II, Benedict, and now we have Francis carrying on these things. So we came to the conclusion, how can a man who does these things remain head of the Catholic Church when he is teaching things that are contrary to Catholic doctrine? And then if the papacy is vacant, what do? You end the vacancy. That's what the church always does when the papacy is vacant. This has been discussed since the early 1970s, although it took years to get a group of people together to actually elect a pope.
I see. And so, well, I'll tell you what, I want to ask this question first. Where, in your opinion, where was the Pope who went apostate? Who was the last correct, proper Pope, in your opinion?
Pope Pius XII. Angelo Roncalli had committed heresy prior to his apparent election as John the 23rd. And so we consider that that election wasn't valid because a heretic cannot become a pope.
Wow. Okay. All the way back to Pius the 12th?
Yes.
Let's see. That would have been, he left office in 1958. So the Pope just before Vatican II.
Right.
Would be your opinion.
Yeah.
I see. And so, okay. How long in you? Okay, so wait a minute. So now the See of Peter was vacant, and you went out. You feel that you filled it. All right. Let me ask you a few questions, more practical then. Have you received the sacrament of orders, sir?
Yes, I have.
From whom?
From a bishop who was ordained consecrated in the Duarte Costa line, because as Pope, I have the authority to reconcile priests and bishops with the church and authorize them to function as priests and bishops, as the popes have done before me, like Pope Pius XII. In fact, there was a seminary in Rome where converts from Anglicanism and the old Catholics who wanted to come to the church, and some of them would be like old Catholic bishops. They'd go through the seminary course, be reconciled with the church, and since they're already proudly consecrated bishop, they wouldn't be conditionally reordained because that would be improper. They'd be allowed to function as a priest.
Okay, so were you consecrated a bishop then?
Yes.
And I'm sorry, who was this bishop who consecrated you again? I didn't catch the name.
Oh, Bishop Robert Bjarnason.
Can you spell that last name for us so I can just record it and look it up? I'm curious about him.
Biarnesen, I believe.
Robert Bjarnason. Okay. And so is he? I mean, and where does he? He's a bishop. He's a Catholic one then, or in the Catholic line?
Working with me. He's actually gone into retirement because he is in ill health, and I think now he's past 80 years old.
Was he like from Society of St. Pius X, or?
Yeah. He was never, well, actually, he went to one of their chapels way back.
When did he break with Rome?
Let's see. Actually, he was encouraged to break with Rome by a priest working with the Society of St. Pius X back in 1983, 84.
Okay, so it goes back there,
Yeah.
that far. So then what is your opinion then? I mean, why are you not aligned with somebody like, well, I mean, to be honest with you, I don't think Society of St. Pius X would support your papacy, but I mean, aren't there other set of vacantist groups? Why are you not at least aligned with some of them? I'm curious.
Well, basically, they've set up their own little churches. And the Sede Vacantists, you would think they all agree the papacy is vacant. They all accept the same date I do, for the beginning of the vacancy. And yet, they're not even united with each other. And that's been the problem. Unity in the church comes from the Pope, according to the Catechism of the Council of Trent. They were more interested in setting up their chapels, and eventually, when they were able to get some of their priests consecrated bishops, setting up their own little jurisdictions, which is what the old Catholics and others call them, and having their own little church rather than getting together and ending the vacancy. We contacted all of these people that we could find worldwide and try and get them to join with us in the election effort.
Okay, so then, okay, yeah, and as I recall, when you were elected Pope, you were not yet ordained a priest or consecrated a bishop.
Right.
But I somewhat on your side on this thing. I know that such things have happened before.
Right.
And they've happened with, I mean, we even had a bishop once who was consecrated a bishop before he got baptized, St. Ambrose. But
He was elected a bishop. He wasn't consecrated.
Oh, okay, fair enough. I stand corrected, sir.
Yeah.
The still rather, amusing story. I mean, it's a gripping story, but it always somehow makes me chuckle. Everybody needed help so bad, they're just like, here, he's not even really a Christian yet. Let's throw him out there and talk to those pagans. But in any case, so I'm sorry, when did you get your consecration done then?
December of 2011.
Oh, really? Okay, so quite a ways into your papacy. See,
Right.
here's the thing that's really bothering me, because as a Catholic, for example, as a modern Catholic, I guess you'd call me one. I don't know what word you'd use. A Novus Ordo Catholic. I'm actually very sympathetic to traditionalist movements. I really am. I don't have Latin Mass available to me as an option, and I wish I did, and all that. But it seems to me that, all right, I'll just use a rude word. Isn't what you're doing smacking of hubris? I mean, you appear to have a few dozen of you decided to excommunicate over 1 billion people and every bishop on the planet to make yourself a pope. How is that not like a really bold thing to do? And how is I mean, how many followers do you have now?
20 or 30. The thing is, size is not what matters. Take a look at the time of Noah and the flood. 1 billion people probably went underwater. 8 were saved.
Oh.
And there's an important point here. I didn't excommunicate anyone. When you become a heretic, you walk out of the church of your own accord. All the church might do is declare you have already left by your actions of heresy. So it's the action of heresy that takes one out of the church. So these people went out of the church of their own accord.
Okay. So what is the status of the average Catholic? Well, no, that's too loaded a word. What overall is I mean, are there only 30 Catholics in the world? What's the status of everybody else?
Yes, basically there are only 30 Catholics. Because to be a Catholic, you must be in union with the true Pope. And so there are only 30 Catholics. That doesn't mean I think everybody else is going to hell. There are a lot of people who were deceived by everything that's gone on, and who do not know what the truth is. God will judge them based upon what they should know and what they do with it. The thing is, members of the church must be in visible union with the Pope. And that's what constitutes membership in the church.
Interesting. And so the Council of Trent documents are the ones you feel most definitively make your case against Vatican II and the last few popes, would you say? Popes.
Yes, the Council of Trent, among other things.
So I'm really having trouble with it, right? Because I'm having trouble accepting you on faith or believing that what you're saying makes entire sense. I mean, I've spoken to sedevacantists. I've spoken, and you know, looked at SSPX, and there's another Society of Paul VI, I think. I can't remember. Quite a few traditionalist groups within the, you know, what you would call the Novus Ordo Church, I guess. Why do none of these people recognize you, I guess? Why do you think none of them recognize you? Because, I mean, it really seems dicey to me that I mean, were there any bishops or priests at all among you? It doesn't seem to me like your elevation to Pope can be valid in any way.
Well, elections have been kind of strange in the past. One emperor appointed 3 popes in a row.
Well, yeah.
Okay. Lay people have interfered with elections. Lay people have helped choose popes in the past. All that's required is that they be Catholics by divine law. True, there is church law, and ordinarily now the cardinals assemble and elect the Pope. But let's say Francis dies tomorrow. The cardinals assemble and someone drops an A-bomb in the Sistine Chapel, wipes all the cardinals out. Who would elect the Pope?
It could happen, yeah.
It could happen. I mean, it's extraordinary, but extraordinary things have happened in the past.
Right, including what I'm sure you'd call the bomb of the Vatican II documents. Let me ask you, what specifically was flawed in Vatican II itself then? Going away from any of the modernist reinterpretations and games and language weaseling and all that we've seen among the moderns, who I think it's fair to say they scored a minor advance and then just snatched the ball and ran it in for a touchdown, like when nobody was looking. But I see a reaction within the church against that to hopefully correct it. And we've seen the church go in dissolution and chaos before over its 2,000 years. How would you become reconciled with the larger body of Catholics, or they become reconciled with you? How would you see that happening?
Well, basically, they would have to reject the heresies of Vatican II and the spirit of Vatican II, and come in under my authority as Pope. It's that simple.
Okay. And what were the specific flaws in Vatican II itself, in the original language, in the original documents? No hanky panky. What was flawed in those core documents, in your view?
There are probably many things in there. I haven't reviewed all the documents, but we can go to the decree on the liturgy, and this actually takes us back prior to Vatican II, to the decree Rubricarum Instructum of John the 23rd. Changing the calendar. Now, there's nothing wrong with changing the calendar. Pius XII did it. Pius X did it. I mean, it's been done throughout history. But it's the principles upon which they changed the calendar in 1960. It's found in a supporting decree, Rubricarum Instructum, for amending local calendar. Because every country, even every diocese, has local feasts which are observed.
Sure.
And that supporting decree was based upon modernist principles. That one, the church has lied to us in the liturgy, that there are things in the official liturgy of the church that are lies that need to be removed. This came out in 60. In 63, in the decree of the liturgy, this was repeated. And so there's modernism in the liturgy. And this is an important document because...
Wait a minute, I just want to make sure I heard you right. You're saying that there's Vatican II document literally says that there were inaccuracy, heresies, errors in the previous liturgy?
Yes.
Wow. I would love to see you send me a reference to that, because I would like to see it. But go ahead and finish your thoughts.
Okay. Then we come to the couple of decrees on the relation of the church with non-Christian religions and on ecumenism. It says straight out in both decrees, and I'm paraphrasing, Muslims worship the one true God.
Okay.
Think about this carefully. Now, we have Allah, which is the God of Islam, and we have the God of Christianity, Father, Son, Holy Ghost, the Trinity.
Yes.
Now, what they're saying is these are the same God. But if you go look into the Quran, and there's even an inscription on the Dome of the Rock that the Trinity is false. They deny the divinity of Jesus Christ.
Right.
Okay, so Muslims are worshiping Allah, whereas we're worshiping Father, Son, Holy Ghost, the Trinity. These are two different gods. They can't be the same God. See, this principle has been put forward that they're the three great monotheistic religions: Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. And then it's implied that because they're monotheists, they all worship the same God. Well, I did a presentation to a group of skeptics some years ago, and I had a PowerPoint presentation, so I had two stick figures of two monotheists. Now, what can I know about these two monotheists? Okay, let's say they both worship the same God. They either both worship the true God, or they both worship a false God. It's not possible for one of them to worship the true God and the other worship a false God, because they worship the same God. Then what if they worship different gods? Well, if this one worships the true God, then this one worships a false God. Now, this one worships the true God, this one worships a false God. And it is still possible that they could worship false gods. But it's impossible for two monotheists who worship different gods to worship the true God. Therefore, either Vatican II is telling me all of the false god of Islam is actually their God, which denies the Trinity, or they've confused, the Trinity and Allah or something. I mean, it's heretical no matter how you slice it, and it's quite clear in the documents.
I got a couple of questions, but I'll shut that for you than that. But one, then the same would be true for the Jews, then, right? You would hold that they do not worship the same God.
Dealing with the Jews, because of their imperfect knowledge of God, whether they worship the true God today or not, one could make arguments either way, which is why I do not use them as an illustration, because it's possible they still are trying to worship the true God, but in an imperfect manner, because they don't realize the Trinity. And so that would bring in confusion, so I'll leave that out of the equation. I want a clear-cut case. I know Allah's a false God. That's absolutely certain. Therefore, this statement from Vatican II is absolutely wrong. You can't make an argument against it.
Okay, well, let me push back at you a little bit and at least tell you what my understanding is. My understanding may be flawed, so you can correct me, or maybe we'll be, but my understanding going in is that the idea is that all human beings are imbued with a natural sense of God, that there is a one God, and through the light of natural reason alone, they can determine that there is a one God, and that multiple religions around the world have discovered that there is at least the one God, and that in the case that there has to be ultimately one God. So they've intellectually figured this much out, because we're all imbued with this sense, and it's a rational conclusion as well. I'm sure you'd agree. Thomas Aquinas, argument from emotion, can't beat it. but that, you know, the Muslims, the Quran claim they're worshiping the God of Abraham. Allah is in fact is the name. Allah is what Jews and Christians in Arabic call God. It's the same word. And so when I hear you say this, I think, but I always understood it that yes, the Muslims have a flawed, warped, imperfect view, but they think they're worshiping the God of Abraham too. And if is Allah truly a separate entity, or is it just a warped, messed up understanding of God? I guess I would ask you for your opinion.
Well, basically, Allah is actually comes from a false god, Allah Tel, who Muhammad co-opted because he used a similar name, and now he already had support for this Alatel, a pagan deity. Okay, Psalm says, "The gods of the Gentiles are devils." Islam recognizes the existence of the doctrine of the Trinity and rejects it. Absolutely.
Yes.
Okay, so the Allah is a false god. True. Natural reason can bring us to a belief in one God. But we could find ourselves worshiping the wrong God, a false God.
A false god impersonating the real God sort of thing, a demon or something like that.
Wouldn't one think the devil might try this to suck in monotheists?
Sure, I would. I would definitely think such a thing. I mean, and I would think it of other religions as well. My genuine hope as a Christian and suspicion as a Christian is that people who are just never really hear the whole truth or are completely lied to, but in their hearts are truly trying, there's hope for them because they're trying to serve the one God anyway. But I guess we don't know.
But objectively, they're following a false God. Whether they're culpable for that is another question. But we're talking about facts. Allah is a false God. Because if Allah is a true God, the Trinity is false. You can't have both.
Well, I can understand that reasoning. It does make perfect sense to me. What do you, and we're probably going to wrap in the next 10 minutes or so, but what happens if you die, sir?
There's a plan in place to elect a successor.
Oh, really? Okay. And I mean, but it's still just your own small group with these 20 to 30 people in it?
Right.
Okay. I mean, I think what I would say to you, just, not to be rude, it's just like, it's just 30 people, huh? And like everybody else is in a, it really does seem like a leap to me, but Michael, just.
Well, let's go to the prophet Isaiah and look this one up. The trees of his forest shall be so few, a little child can name them. How many people do you think a little child can name? See, we have gotten this false idea that there's safety in numbers. If you start looking at what the fathers of the church, the saints say, the majority of Christians go to hell. Why? St. John Vianney tells us they don't know their own religion. Because if they knew their religion and lived by it, they wouldn't go there. Okay, how many in wherever parish church you go to on a Sunday, what percentage do you think really know their faith?
I would say, and it's not on me to judge, but
I know,
but it's probably not even the majority.
It probably isn't. In my catechism class, okay, this was a catechism class started by concerned parents who taught it themselves, taking interest in their children learning the faith. Now, it was divided up so that you had like 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I was with one time or another 3 different grades, one on either side of my grade and my grade. Of whatever number of children that would cover, 10, 15. There are 2 of us who took are catechism class serious? Only 2. And this was children of parents who were really concerned about their children learning the faith. So,
Right.
yeah, if it's that bad in this group, what do you think it's like amongst a group where the parents are worldly? They're not, looking into anything. For them, it's Mass on Sunday, $5 in the collection plate because they did away with fish on Friday, except during Lent. How many Catholics do you think abstain from meat on Fridays in Lent and Ash Wednesday, which is the current law of the Vatican II Church?
Yeah, I wouldn't guess, but I would guess non-observance is very common.
Exactly. And Mom saw something on the Catholic Conference of Bishops meeting, 15, 20 years ago. They're talking about moving all the holy days of obligation to Sundays so people would be more likely to go. And one of the bishops got up and says, we shouldn't do this. One, those who make the effort to go to Mass on holy days of obligation, which is difficult, especially the Ascension on a Thursday, All Saints Day, the Immaculate Conception, the Assumption can often be on weekdays, so you've got to work around your work schedules and all that. And the people who make that effort will be extremely unhappy because they're going to all this effort to do what they should. And the people that don't come don't care anyway. They don't care about their obligation to assist at Mass on holy days of obligation.
Okay, but in defense of that one, to a large extent at least, if I think that if you look through the entire sweep of history, not all Catholics were all that observant. In fact, most of them probably weren't. But I mean, what we pray for is as we get older, people learn better. They learn more. This doesn't seem like justification for such an extreme action to me. But I do agree with you that we definitely, we want to pray that people get more serious and start to learn. And I do agree with you actually that you have to decide to do it because a lot of parishes, they're not doing it, or they're selling them something very watered down, very simple, very comfortable, very modern, very hip and relevant, as they say.
But what I call the church comfortable, and it affects not just the Vatican II Church. It affects traditionalism. I saw it setting in the late 70s. In the early 70s, traditionalists were fervent for the most part. I mean, if they could assist at Mass, they did.
Mm-hmm.
They went to great efforts. I mean, I can assist at a Sunday Mass this Sunday, 300 miles from here. Load up the car, we're going. That's the way they were in the early 70s. Once they finally got into their comfortable pews, they got to be what I call the church comfortable. And that's what we had in the 30s, 40s, and 50s.
Really?
Was the church comfortable? Yes. One priest described it. Mass on Sunday, fish on Friday, and $5 in the collection plate, and call it good.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the problem. Catholics weren't fervent in the 30s, 40s, and 50s. So they were ready to be sold down the river in the 60s. They didn't know their faith. They didn't really care a whole lot. They just wanted to get it over with.
Well, how does this do you really feel that this is more extreme than the other cases in the past where we've had anti-popes and multi-popes and popes deposing each other and popes digging each other up and putting each other on trial and popes invalidating the orders of their previous popes, bishops and priests and on and on? Do you truly feel that this is like worse than any of that and justifies a whole new papacy?
Basically, my papacy is not a new papacy. It's a continuation of the papacy. And that's where we got to get the point straight. Yeah, these other problems were extremely serious. In fact, the Western Schism led to the Protestant Revolt. The seeds of the Protestant Revolt were planted and it grew up high enough before the Western Schism was done. They were infecting the clergy in some parts of the world. So a century later, Martin Luther could nail 95 Theses on the church door at Wittenberg and drag millions of people out of the Catholic Church. It's kind of interesting to note the last anti-pope was somewhere before the Crossroads Revolt, prior to the current crisis. So the church got to this point, like papacy's, rock solid, which it is, because it wasn't really being assailed by competition from within the church, which should not exist. But it was only being assailed from the outside. There was always one pope succeeded by another, holding throne.
Okay. Two more questions, and then we'll go ahead and wrap up, sir. An easy one. The verse you gave earlier, you mentioned something, I think, in Isaiah about something about the end times. A child will only be able to name. Can you give me that again, just so the audience knows what you're talking about?
The trees of his forest shall be so few that a little child can name them.
And what verse is that? Chapter and verse is that, sir?
I'm pretty sure it's Isaiah 10:19, or it might be 19:10, but I think it's 10:19.
Fair enough. Fair enough. I'll go look at that, and maybe the adults, the audience can go look at that for themselves too. I guess I'll just go ahead and hit you with the hardball question. Why aren't you a wicked, schismatic, heretic, anti-pope who's going to hell? Why aren't you that?
Because I'm teaching the same faith Christ taught the apostles and the church is taught to this day.
Fair enough, sir. That's your answer, and that's a fair answer. Okay, and last of all, either on the internet or in real life, where can people find you and your flock and etc.?
The website is VaticanInExile.com. The IN is spelled in.
And do you have streaming and podcasting and that sort of thing? Do you put services up on that?
We have an internet radio station, which is linked from there. We have a traditional catechism site linked from there. We don't do much live streaming. We do a little bit on Facebook when we are able to, because that's just one extra thing, and we don't want to interrupt. Someone who's trying to pray at Mass is now having to supervise a broadcast. We don't think that's appropriate.
Fair enough. And I also noticed there is a channel called Pope Michael on YouTube. Am I assuming that is your channel as well?
That's my channel. I haven't posted anything in quite a while because I have to do an internet radio sermon every week. And plus we have a publication on our website, VaticanInExile.com, called The Olive Tree, which I'm responsible for 2 articles for.
Oh, excellent. Okay. And do you say Mass?
Certainly, say Mass every day.
Oh, every day. All right, sir. All right. Well, this has been a genuine pleasure, Pope Michael, and I really enjoyed the conversation. I will say honestly, I don't think I agree with your election, but I think you're pointing at problems in the church that need addressing, and I enjoyed the conversation. Thank you very much. So. And God bless you. You're in my prayers. Everybody, go ahead and feel free to check out Pope Michael's material. And otherwise, we will be back here tomorrow night, and we will be doing our broadcasts every night. We have an interview coming up with a rabbi who is critical of Zionism. We have John C. Wright will be coming up again soon. So everybody, please make sure to give us a like. Please give us a subscribe. Please tell your friends or enemies. Please find us on redpillreligion.com and support us financially if you could. And God bless everybody.